Hi, and welcome back to 3 Lessons from Breakthrough Leaders with me, Zana Ryabchuk, the CEO at Breakthrough Global, and I'm here again with Dr. Bart Sale.
Hello, everyone.
And this podcast is all about giving you insider tips and know-how from the world's foremost leaders and creative talents, distilling their knowledge and experience into 3 lessons which we guarantee will help you and your companies to unleash your potential.
Today, we're delighted to be joined by Nick Emery. Nick Emery, CBE, has been around marketing and advertising for nearly 40 years. From selling quarter-page black and white ads in Country Homes and Interiors magazine to running and creating WPP's biggest media agency, Mindshare. Nick now runs Jellyfish, a global AI and digital-first marketing organization, and is a partner in the Brandtech Group. Well, welcome, Nick, and we're so pleased that you accepted our invitation to be part of our podcast.
Thank you.
Would you like to start off by just describing or giving us an insight into how you met us and how we met?
I mean, that's kind of why I said yes to this. I don't usually do podcasts because I don't really like talking about myself. It's much more about the team. But I felt really nostalgic, actually, about the course because I think it was. It won't come as a surprise to many people. It's probably the only training course I've ever been in my life. I'm not sure if you call it training. It probably isn't training, is it? You probably have a different word than training. But the only such course I've been in my life. And I think there are quite a lot of things that still live with me from that course. I think the overriding thing is, how do you not let things get in your way to come up with great ideas? And that's really why we work in this business. Work in the business and not lots of other numerical scientific businesses, because we want to create new things and have some fun doing it. And that to me was what the course was all about. I just joined Ogilvy, and I joined Ogilvy to work on 3 pieces of business that I thought were the most creative pieces of business in the world, or to work on at that time. It was Microsoft, Duracell, and Guinness. And I thought, great, we can come up with some really good ideas, right? And your course was you had the great idea of bringing all the agencies together. So we all had to go because we were all worried about not being there and somebody else, talking to the client. And it was really interesting going from people's skepticism to, almost sort of, euphoria over the course of 2 or 3 days. I think it kind of talked to a lot of what I wanted to do, right? To come up with great ideas and not let things get in your way to get to that end result.
I love the sense of fun that you're kind of picking up on there. And that is a massive part of why, A, we love what we do, but also I think why the people that go through the Breakthrough program really, really enjoy themselves, because they're kind of expecting maybe a stale business seminar. And of course, it's like the complete opposite of that. Because when you're having fun, you're learning through play, aren't you? And of course, the ideas just flow.
Yeah. And we made some bonds there. I mean, a lot of stuff you would kind of intuitively do, I guess, right? But from our point of view, just that need to have creative media and technology working together was central to that. Even sort of at the time, I mean, silly ideas, right? For some reason, no one who'd worked on Duracell had ever decided to turn Warren Street Tube Station into a rabbit warren for all the Duracell bunnies. So we did that. But to do that, you had to do a lot of stuff, right? You have to get a lot of teams together to do that. And this shows my age. On Microsoft, we did every color ad in every newspaper on the same day for Microsoft. And that meant you had to get a team together to do that. And Guinness at the time were doing those brilliant black and white ads, the small little black and white ads, hand-drawn by Carl and the team. And that was very topical. So you had to be a team, right? You had to be looking at culture and you had to come up with stuff. So it was a kind of seminal time and I think a seminal course.
Lesson 1. Anything is possible with teamwork.
What is team to you? Why is it important? Let's hear some of your insights around that.
Well, partly because you can never do anything on your own, right? And it always takes a team. And this is probably my own fault, but I'm always deeply suspicious of people who talk about I a lot and my team and I'm a leader and all that kind of stuff. Because I think everyone has to work together to a common goal, but everyone's got different or complementary skill sets. Running a company is always a balance and a combination of clients or products, if you're a manufacturer, clients, products, markets, and countries. And you have to have those in balance, and you have to be able to have feedback from all those people to create a cause and a direction that has people aligned behind that in terms of what you're trying to create that's different and that will drive growth. So it's always going to be a better team. I love the analogy of the again, this will date me, but of the Dutch football team, in the 1970s, who kind of coined total football. And the idea of total football was that anybody can play any position on the pitch, but depending on the opposition, you might play a different position. Right. So I think teamwork is about that. How do you create an ever-changing kind of team that can be agile, dependent upon the cause of the situation that you're in? And that just takes a lot of work. And basically, you just have to care. You can't put a structure in. You can't mandate you're global or local. You have to just show that you have a care and a compassion for people, and you want them to be on the right position on the pitch, and then to get some joy out of seeing how fantastic they are in that position on the pitch. Teamwork's always a combination of, you have to get the right people on the bus, to use that long-standing analogy, but then you've got to make sure that the people on the bus are in the right seat on the bus. Because not everyone wants to be a creator or an inventor or a manager. People want to be different things. And there's just a real joy and deep satisfaction of seeing a team come together to produce something brilliant. And that's never about the individual.
I completely agree. We've had so many examples of that, haven't we, Bart, even just within Breakthrough, where you have someone in one role and they're just kind of underperforming, but you think, actually, you've got loads of potential. There's something's going wrong here. I think I was probably one of those. I was in the wrong job. And as soon as the role changes, it's like these people are unleashed. They just kind of, and you see, oh yeah, that was the potential. That's what I saw in you in the interview, whatever it might have been. You were just in the wrong role. And then how you can kind of coach and access that. We've had it several times, I think, where we've kind of just moved somebody into something else and suddenly they flourished,
I'm going to use I now, sorry, but I was always more comfortable. I was born as a strategist, so I was always more comfortable, and still am really, I think, creating, coming up with ideas and working in pitches. But you kind of very quickly realise that you can't affect change unless you control the P&L, and that sucks you into management and selling your soul a little bit, for the business dynamics of the company. Otherwise, you can't drive change. But that's not for everybody, right? Some people don't do that and are very happy just pursuing what they do and the brilliance of what they do. And they're all equally great. They're all equally useful and valid. It's just about making sure that everyone's happy doing what they're doing. I think a company works really well when a person's individual ambition is aligned to the corporate ambition. And they should be able to do that. I always think that if somebody leaves Jellyfish or leaves any company I've worked for because they're going to go and do something completely different, if they're going to go and start a bakery or they're going to move out of the broad marketing community, I can kind of live with that. But if they move to a competitor or they move somewhere else, that's the personal kind of thing that I take very personally, because we should be able to create an environment for you to do anything you want, right? If you want to be the most brilliant analyst, the most brilliant creator, the most brilliant media planner, the most brilliant, strategist, you should be able to do that within the broad canvas of the company. And if you can't, then we've kind of failed, right? We've failed to either put you in the right position, or we aren't as ambitious as we should be in our product development and how we talk to clients. So I think that's why team's important, because it drives success ultimately, and it hopefully makes people happy, and it makes shareholders happy.
One thing that occurs to me when you talk about that, and going back to your idea of the Dutch soccer team, is that we're fortunate that we see cultures from the outside. And often when you're locked in a culture, you don't really see it. It's as they say, it's like the fish in water. It doesn't know it's in water. And it harks back to a great anthropologist that I read a lot of his work. I think his name was Edward T. Hall. He wrote a book, and he was talking really about how Americans don't really understand other cultures. This is going way back. And he said that the only way that you can really get insight into your own culture is to be in other cultures. And that by visiting other cultures and understanding those, you can get more insight then in the culture that you are part of. You, Nick, and we're fortunate that we're working with all these different cultures. And in many ways, we can see with fresh eyes, why do they do it that way? Why don't they do it this way? So there's that aspect of it. But then leading on, with our programs, we take them out of their culture. And they sort of create this sort of little mini thing as part of our program, this little mini culture where they can change the rules or break the rules. And I think that's why, A, they have such a good time, and B, they come up with new ideas. And the challenge then is always taking that back into the organization. But I think that 3 or 4 days where they're now outside of their culture, but working on the culture rather than being swamped into it, is the place where you can start to get some transformation.
And I think that idea of harnessing rebellion and codifying rebellion, is a really interesting space. I mean, two things to listening to you: that one, it speaks to diversity, right? And you have to be open to all cultures to form your culture. I think it's very important that companies are a welcoming place for all talent to work in all ways. So all diverse talent to work in whatever they want to do, whether that's in the office or not in the office. We should be able to be flexible around that. But probably around the same time as when I joined your program, I think probably Good to Great came out, or around that time, I would have thought, right? And there's a great line in that about you cannot invent your company identity. You have to discover it. You discover it like a great pair of clothes that just fits you comfortably, like a fantastic pair of clothes. You just discover that. You can't just go out and suddenly say you are bold, courageous, and all those horrible words that people use for empty visions and mission statements. You have to kind of discover it. It has to be true to you, right? Therefore, the culture has to be true to you. It has to resonate. Otherwise, you're just the patient rejects the organ.
It's amazing how often we get pushback on that, because sometimes we'll do values work with organisations, and in the spirit of consolidating to create those kind of words that to completely agree with you, Nick, in the end almost are meaningless because they mean everything to everybody, and you don't get that true identity. There's such a pushback and a desire to have those very generic words so that they can kind of cover you for things. And we're always saying, well, that could be any company. What would your company be? What's specific to you that it could be your fingerprint, and only they could be your values or a description that defines who you are. And so people do struggle, I think, to define their identity. And I wonder if there's something in what you're saying about team there, that by truly understanding the team, by truly living in the team and getting all those parts of that team to thrive, you'd be able to see the wood for the trees more easily.
And I also think there's something around cause as well.
Yes.
What is your cause? What are you trying to achieve? Because when we created Mindshare, there was definitely a feeling that the media people had not been quite recognised as much as they should have been in the full service agencies, and it was mainly about strategy and creative, right? And we were just being used to pay for everybody else's exorbitant salaries, And so that idea of rebellion and breaking free of your shackles, was something that really united people. And before we did Mindshare, we had a company called The Network that we tried to do as well within Ogilvy. And then before that, we had the Wow Factory and various things that we'd invented to try and break out of that. And then you had a cause, right? And that was the cause to do that. We did the same thing when we created Brandtech Media. That was about making media fun and exciting. And why is media sometimes seems the most boring job in the world, where actually it's 20th Century Fox and Google and Meta and all the most exciting things in the world are media. Everything begins and ends in media, so you should realize that that's an exciting business to work in. It shouldn't be, it should be the most exhilarating job. And then with Jellyfish, it's about how do we reinvent every aspect of marketing through an AI lens? How do you really realize the potential of what AI can do to drive creativity? So I think, yes, there has to be a kind of form of words that people understand, that you can narrate and tell your story about when you do your pitches. But underneath that, there has to be a cause that unites the team beyond just wanting to win the league or be number one or all that kind of stuff. It has to be something else, something more meaningful.
So Nick is incredibly passionate about teamwork, and we know the power of teamwork is absolutely essential in any successful organisation. It's a universal truth, and we have a concept called the line of one that really brings this to life. One of the elements of the line of one that I think speaks to so much of what Nick was saying is this idea of unity, not uniformity, and diversity of thought and personality, culture, background that you can bring in. So we need people to be united. We want you to all be going after the same thing with laser focus, focus, driven by purpose, to Nick's points, but you can have your own identities within that. You don't need to be uniform, you don't all need to be homogenous. And I think that's where amazing ideas can become sparked. It's where incredible teamwork and execution happens, and also where people enjoy themselves and have the most fun and feel fulfilled at work.
And Nick's experience over the years, he's been in many teams, he's led many teams. And from a leadership point of view, I like the fact that he saw himself as part of the team, and that everyone in the team, for him and for us, is valuable. They've all got something to offer. He talked about some of the best teams are interchangeable. You could take any position within that team. And that idea that there's a lot of belonging, there's a lot of support, there's a lot of we thinking rather than I thinking, actually creates a very powerful team. And teams are not created once and then they're there forever. They need to be created and recreated, and often very frequently. So ask yourself, are you putting the time in to actually generate and regenerate your team and generate you as part of that team? Lesson 2, bring the human into AI.
Talk to us a little bit about AI and how you see that this is going to reshape particularly your industry, because it's going to radically change every single industry, but for yours particularly.
I think a fusion of both human and agentic, right? So it has to be both, because certain AI tools will quickly become a commodity, and therefore it's how quickly you can use them to your advantage. But I think it's an interesting debate in that historically in our business, it's been very much like that line from The Leopard. This is everything has to change so everything stays the same. Everything is kind of iterated, but there's always been, the Titans have always taken over, and maybe it's Google now and it used to be News Corp, and maybe it's Jellyfish now and it used to be, I don't know, some other company. But that might not be the case now, right? Because it might be fundamentally different in terms of how people work, because you now have agentic shopping, you have kind of multimodal ways of appreciating and navigating your way around the world. It means that all the old rules really don't apply. The way we're trying to translate it for clients is to try and take every aspect. We took the last 12 months taking every aspect of what is traditional marketing and reinvented it. So the market research business that was a big industry, we're reinventing now, because clients and brands are being evaluated through the large language models, which is essentially the target audience, the most influential consumer that you're never going to meet or never going to see. Right? But they are going to be the ones that appraise what your brand is and how your brand is interpreted and seen. So planning really is about understanding how those large language models understand your brand and how they're seeing it, and then how you adapt to that and how you target that. So that's like the new Kantar, essentially, the new way of looking at your brand reputation. Social agents allow you to look at how your brand is being seen through the social world, and that's the new form of social listening. We have Pencil, which is the most advanced kind of Gen AI studio to create content now that you can do TV commercials in 12 hours, and then you can produce that content at scale. So that's the kind of the new studio. And we're getting very quickly to the world where you can go from an idea, an insight, to activation with like a few people. So what used to be hordes of people are now 2 or 3 people. But that allows you to then both scale up very quickly in terms of how you can work with clients, but also it's fascinating in terms of which clients adopt that and which don't. So if we come back to mission statements and words, we were quite careful when we looked at our new website to say we want to work for progressive brands and progressive clients, because not everyone wants to do that, because that's a frightening pace of change. Because all the systems and all the ways of working that have been set up over years, since P&G were doing soap operas, is being turned on its head, and not everyone is in a position to do that and take advantage of that. But it allows us to go from understanding how brands are seen, to reacting to that, to producing content to react to that, to measuring how that content is seen, to then changing that content and that narrative in hours, rather than months. So it's both exciting and frightening. And it's also a brilliant kind of business puzzle, because the old world still exists, right? You're still not suddenly AI. So how you manage both the old world and the new world, and what used to be a maxim in our business was the old world paid for the new world. That's not quite the case now. The old world, you still have to service the old world while the new world, is driving an exponential rate of change. So it is either a kind of existential moment for us that everyone's frightened about, or it's the most exciting time we've ever lived in. But I think it's a revolution up there with the Industrial Revolution, that's for sure, and all the other hyped words that are out there. And Eric Schmidt said, it possibly is the only thing that's been underhyped, and that's probably right.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it's both. I think it is the most exciting time, yeah, and also the most terrifying, right?
I think it's already existential in the sense that existential is mainly about the emotions it produces and the uncertainty it produces and the feeling of uncertainty, and that's already there.
So it's going to be a very interesting social time as well as people come to grips with it. And then on top of that, it's, yes, the route that AI is taking is a vertical horizon, right? It's just beyond exponential. But people can't adapt to utilizing it that quickly. Their brains just won't be able to pick it up. And it's so expansive. It's like, where do you even begin? So I think the adoption curve is going to really be what almost slows it down slightly. And that's going to be coming up against people who are adopting really fast, to your point, and like who's going to be paying for it, the old world or the new. So it's just very interesting, and could be quite an unsettled time, I think, for society as well.
But I think we always find a way.
Yeah.
We always find a way, and we're always creative, and we always do it. And companies will rise again and will reinvent. It might well be that companies that are making tens, hundreds of millions of dollars out of what are now antiquated working practices do not survive, but new ones will bloom that employ people in new and different ways. But I think that comes back to, you have to care for your people, and you have to care about the future of how they're going to work and how you want to bring people together in a way that, how do they embrace that, right? How do you combine the human and the agentic in a way that motivates both companies and people?
I think we'll find a way. And I think, I'm not saying there won't be issues and there won't be problems, but, if we think back, the early days of the internet, there were similar fears, weren't there? That it's going to change everything. And it did change everything in a way, but we're still here now.
Yeah, I'm not quite Skynet about it all, but you can see how people are, right? And what's also interesting is how the tech titans will try and keep hold of their dominance, and will they do that? And will it just be the same thing as Standard Oil? And people reorganize to still keep hold of power. So there's a whole kind of unfortunate kind of Bilderberg capitalist angle that you can go down, and then there's a dystopian what happens to the business angle. But most importantly is what happens to the individual and how motivating it is for them. I mean, in theory, there is nothing that we do that ChatGPT can't do, right? So clients could just do it all themselves.
Yeah.
So the need for us to constantly invent, make it easy, come up with new solutions, which is the DNA of what we have always done, is imperative. And Jack Smythe, there's a genius strategist who we work with, he came up with the expression B to A. So it's not B to B anymore or B to C, it's brands and businesses to agents.
Yeah.
So how you market to agents now is the future, which is why the large language models, it's revolutionizing how we work.
So I loved many of the things that Nick was saying, particularly about that you need to have that combination of the human and the AI to make AI successful. And I think we saw this so much with digital transformations a few years ago, where organizations were very, very focused on the shifting technology, very focused on how they were going to implement technology. And of course, the reality is the technology moves on. And with AI, the technology moves on faster than it ever was with the digital transformation era. So really, you have to be thinking about whether or not your teams, your people are adaptable to change, whether they have the right mindset to be continuously adapting, continuously evolving, and sometimes shifting very, very rapidly, very urgently in this new reality. And that takes really an act of actively shaping your culture so that you are ready for any change that can happen, whether it's AI or other uncertainties, to make yourself future ready. So Nick married two things together which are absolutely critical. The idea that human needs to be within AI, and we saw this so much with clients during the era of digital transformation, that they were focusing so much on the technology. It was all about technology and getting people prepared and implementing the technology. And they forgot to work on the mindset and the culture of the people who were going to be implementing or discovering those different technologies in their organizations. And of course, the technology will continually change, and what's relevant this year is going to be completely different next year. It's even more acute with AI. And so what you need to be thinking about is, are our people ready for continuous and constant change? Do they have the right mindset to be agile, to be flexible, and to sense this idea of urgency and urgently shifting where the goalposts are and what you need to do to adapt in that new reality? And that's going to put you in a good stead, not only for the AI revolution and the kind of second industrial revolution that that's going to create, but it'll put you in good stead to be able to exist in this new volatile and uncertain world that we're all living in now.
Lesson 3, overcome the resistance to change.
And thinking about what we were talking about before in terms of overcoming this, so like the barriers to people adopting it, the rapid pace of this change, and bringing it again back to culture at the beginning of our conversation. So what are some of the things that you've observed over your career, Nick, in terms of how to lean into that resistance, how to overcome that resistance to change, and bring people on the journey with you, bring the team on the journey with you?
Well, I think it goes back to caring for everybody, but also seeing what people are good at, and I always think I try and have 3 things that encourage that. I think we always have to be kind, right? We have to be understanding of where we work and be compassionate. We're not neuroscientists. We're not saving lives. You have to put what we do into perspective. You've got to be organized and respect people's time and be on time and not be late and be efficient but you've got to champion change. And I think if people see that and they see both consistency and security and know where they're standing and where they're going and what the cause is that they're all backing, and can see people who stick their head above the parapet being recognized, celebrated and championed, then it encourages them to break that and step their head above the parapet in their own way that is right for them, right? And I think if you do that, then you get the most brilliant people in offense and the most brilliant people in midfield in defense, and then you can swap them around at will because you're all pointing at the same goal.
Working with teams and describing teams, and in business there's sort of various analogies, and they tend to be sports teams or military teams or even creative teams like orchestras and so on. And one of the things we've noticed over the years is that one thing that distinguishes all of those great models of teams and high performance teams from business teams is that they do most of their work in rehearsal. They're constantly training, they're rehearsing, and they do far more rehearsal and far more training than the game. And it's the opposite in business. It's like you're always on, you're always in the game. And therefore, there's the pressure of that, of always being in the game, but there's no chance to rehearse. And what happens in rehearsal? People make mistakes. That's how they learn. They actually make mistakes, they get it right, they correct it. And it's almost like in business, that's not allowed. You can't do that. So it's a sort of underlying anxiety and fear within any team.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're lucky in some sense on our side of the fence rather than the client side of the fence, because every time we pitch, we call it training. Whether you win or lose, you're training, right? Because the fact it's a concentrated environment, you come together, you've got a brief that you're answering. If you win, it's fantastic and it's great for morale and happy days, right? But if you don't, you analyze why you don't, right? And did you not because your product wasn't great or your people wasn't great or your story wasn't great? What was it that didn't get you there? And then you scrabble around and you work out what it is, and then you hopefully come up with something, and you get a 6-month competitive advantage until somebody else sees it in a pitch and steals it, and then your competitive advantage has gone, and then the whole thing starts again, right? But so you have to quite like that. I mean, I think you could call that pressure, but I think it's hopefully just fun, right? Because you're just creating things.
But I think that's your relationship with failure, Nick. So you've obviously, from some of the things you said on the conversation today, you've got a very healthy relationship with failure. And being in the industry you're in, you need to have that relationship with failure, right? That it's a learning experience. Yeah. And I love that. It's exactly what we say on the program. It goes beyond just the idea that it's failure is just feedback, to actually it's a learning experience. It's so much more, and it's how you look at it to make that an enriching part of your life. And the people who are really comfortable with feedback, love feedback, receive it, implement it, and kind of don't make failure their identity and see it as a learning opportunity, are the ones who are the most successful in life. And I think also they're the people who are the best at coaching other people, because they're really good at seeing the potential in others and getting them to realise that potential and not worrying about the stuff that hasn't worked and focusing what's got to work next.
Yeah, I think so. I don't see it as failure. I see it as it's just perspective, right? I mean, it's great if you win. You have to treat success and failure in equal measure, all that kind of stuff, right? And I think ultimately you're just an editor, right? If you're managing a business, you're just an editor. I think there's something that's quite. We used to talk about the creative process was. A collision of 2 or 3 different ideas coming together to create a new idea. That was what we talk about creative, wasn't it? But I think in business, you do the same thing, right? You listen to people coming from different angles and you then distill it down into hopefully a new and different direction that people can join. So I think it's a similar thing, right? So I don't think it's failure necessarily. I think you're just always listening and always distilling and always in the market, which is why, to go back to the beginning, I don't think a global structure or a national structure or a centralized structure, decentralized structure works. It's always about your clients, your products, your markets are always in flux, and you have to be listening and being attentive and juggling and seeing what works.
And being adaptive. Being adaptive and being flexible with that.
I mean, I had this conversation with somebody recently who's got a very, very senior job at a big global client. And I said, really, in theory, your job's the easiest job in the world, right? Because all you really have to do is sit in the center and look at all the great ideas that are around the world and just spot them and scale them. That's all you have to do. You don't really have to stress that much. You should just do that. And that is all a global job is. Just sitting there, spotting great talent, promoting great talent, spotting great ideas, promoting great ideas, and breaking through barriers, to make sure you get there.
As we saw with the last lesson, to navigate successfully through this new world of uncertainty and unknowing, and new things coming from all directions, we need a culture that is flexible and it's adaptable and it's not fearful. And whenever we implement something new or some new change or some new transformation, every culture will have somewhere within it a resistance to that. And this is what you need to look for. Look at the resistance to change embedded in your workforce and in your culture. And what we need to do at that point is we need to empower people to shift mindset, to create new behavior, to not fear change, and to see the opportunity within it. So ask yourself that. Do I have that culture?
So, Nick, the bit where you do have to talk about yourself with our hot seat questions. All right, are you ready?
Oh, great. How exciting.
All right. So what's the most exciting thing you've ever done?
I'm from Yorkshire, so no one ever gets excited. We never get excited in Yorkshire. It's what we do, right? So today is our wedding anniversary, right? So this doesn't sound very exciting, but when we first got, a long time after we first got together, but probably the most exciting thing is we got a dog. It doesn't sound very exciting, but getting a dog was like, we got a dog and that was a sign that we were committed and we were going to be together and it was going to be a thing. And going to get Boo from Dogs Trust and bringing her home and then, deciding that was going to be our life now. I think that was probably the most exciting thing.
I love that. Nick, what inspires you in life?
Working with really brilliant people who want to break through and make changes and do something different. Right? I think we're so lucky. All throughout my career, I've just been surrounded by the most brilliant people. And now at Jellyfish, we really are. I mean, they're geniuses, right, in everything that they do. And just sitting back and seeing them in action and seeing a pitch come together and a story come together is just genius. And the ideas they come up with, and Jack came up with this shared model, large language model thing 2 years ago. And we took it to the tech team. We had it in market in a month. And it's just constantly inventive. and they're brilliant. It's a real joy to do it. That's why I do it, because ultimately we work in this job because we want to create new things, and they create new things, and it's just great to watch them.
And finish this sentence. Success is
teamwork.
Lovely. Thank you, Nick.
It's been great, Nick. Honestly, it really has. And
well, thank you. It's been a real honour, actually, Bart. I mean, you were a big part of my life, and a lot of the stuff, right, that we went through has stayed with me. So thank you.
Thanks again for joining us. Remember to hit the subscribe button and join us again for our next set of lessons. And if you've got any questions or comments, email us at bartsale@breakthroughglobal.com or connect with us directly on LinkedIn at Breakthrough Global.
And we'd love to hear your own leadership stories. And we'd also love for you to share this episode on your own social media and review and rate this podcast on your player of choice.
So thank you to our production team, Yulia Soltisova, Victoria Okorafor at Breakthrough Global and Robin Leeburn at Fairley Media. And of course, thank you for listening.